Interesting one for you today. I've got with me Kirkland Signature driver and Kirkland Signature golf balls, which I've been hearing a lot about lately. And I'm going to compare these with one of the industry leaders. I've got the Titleist GT2 with me and the Pro V1. Let's see what we're getting. Right, so why am I doing this? Well, I wanted to check the value proposition on offer here. So as we know, the Kirkland product comes from US wholesaler Costco, and we're seeing some very low prices. So we've got $159.99 in terms of pounds for the driver and £12.50 for a dozen of the balls. When you compare that to the prices of something like the Titleist product, I'm seeing the GT2 at around $579.99 at the moment, and the Pro V1's over £50. So what I really want to know is, what are you giving up by going into that cheaper product? We're going to look at sound, we're going to look at feel, we're going to look at overall performance. Let's see how we get on. So most of you watching this will know just about all there is to know about the Titleist GT range and how popular it is on all the global professional tours, often topping the driver count on everywhere it takes place. And what we've got with the Titleist from a tech point of view, I'll just do a very brief overview, is the first multi-material crown Titleist have ever done. They've always been a single piece construction. This is the first time they've gone away from that. But as I said, it's at a premium, $579.99. And when you go into the Kirkland driver, which is, as I said, less than £200, we're hearing about a multi-material construction of the crown, carbon composite crown, titanium sole, where have we heard that before? And we also get an adjustable hosel. Where have we heard that before? So we've got a few similarities going on here. Let's take a look at the visuals. Right, well, these visuals can often start even before you pull the head cover off. Something I see on a lot of budget equipment, they cut corners with things like the head cover. But when you look at this Kirkland head cover, it's a very premium feeling leather. We've got some nice detail on there. The inside feels really nice and protective. It's actually a superb quality head cover and not dissimilar to what we've got here with Titleist. It feels very much the same. Maybe the Titleist head cover is a little bit softer on the outside, but a very similar feel inside and not a dissimilar look. So that's a good start. Then when we get into the actual product and what we're looking at, it's pretty promising again. Before I even talk about the looks and the profiles, again, what you can see in some of this budget equipment, they cut corners with components. With this Kirkland driver here, we've got an even flow shaft from Project X, which is a high-end product, and a lambkin grip, which feels great. And we know Lambkin makes some great products. So no corners have been cut there. Obviously over here, I've got the shaft I was fitted into by Titleist. So this is probably an even more expensive club because it's got the upchargeable shaft. When you look from the sole point of view, there's a little bit more going on with the Kirkland. We've got a little bit more of sole topography, as I call it, a bit of humps and bumps and a few more graphics. But it's pretty minimal. We've just got the one Kirkland logo and signature written there. There's nothing hugely fussy about that, which I have always liked in driver, keeping it nice and minimal. I said in my reviews of the Titleist GT driver when it came out, perhaps a little bit basic from the sole position, but again, I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth there because I like that minimal look. When you put them down behind the ball, the shape is extraordinarily similar between this Kirkland driver and the GT there. Both nice rounded profiles. One thing that I do like potentially a little bit more actually about the Kirkland in this position, they've gone for some carbon effect on that crown. We know it's a carbon composite crown, but they're actually visibly showing us that carbon. Titleist made the decision with their GT line to kind of blend it in with what had gone before in TSR and TSI and not show off that carbon. So it's a solid black finish. Both of them actually look really premium. They've both got very subtle alignment aids, if you like, to help you center the ball. We've got the GT on top of the Titleist, and we've just got a very small dot on the top of the Kirkland. From this angle, it's really premium. Right, so obviously I've just spoken about the visual of the drivers. We introduced the ball a little bit at the start. I didn't really have much to say about the look of the ball because they're white round and they sit on the ground. So what I really want to see is how they pair together, how the Titleist ball pairs with this Titleist driver and what the overall proposition is between if you were to go with a Titleist driver and a Titleist ball versus the Kirkland and the Kirkland. So let's get a few away. So I want to gather some data and see how that actually stacks up. And while I'm doing that, let's just have a little chat about the sound and the feel, because I've often found when you go down in sort of price and down to the more, frankly, budget end of the market that we're talking about, that's the kind of stuff that can be compromised. You can get some clangier or tinnier sounds and some feels that aren't quite as sophisticated as with some of the more expensive tech. So let's see if that takes place. One more thing before I hit. I've made sure they're set up at the exact same loft. Even this is an 8-degree head versus a 10.5 head. I've lofted that right down using the loft sleeve. So that's now down at 9 degrees, and we've got this boosted up to 9 degrees as well. So we're at the same base loft to make sure we've got some comparison. And I've hit this club a lot before, so I kind of know what to expect from a sound point of view. Well, that's really good. That is one of the big things that I saw with GT this year, was a real improvement in that. Not only the sound, I hope you picked that up on the camera, but the actual feel through the hands. It's one of the best feeling in terms of what it offers as a holistic package, shall I say. So some of them feel very lively, but that can make them harsh. Some of them feel a little bit softer, which maybe doesn't give you the sense of power that you might want from driver. This is an absolute perfect blend. It's probably one of the most sophisticated feeling drivers on the market, and that was a nice little start, a nice little high draw down there. Let's see if we can do that again. Yeah, again, even though that was slightly off the toe, that one, I get a real sense of, not necessarily forgiveness because it wasn't too far off the toe, but there was stability in that head. You know you're using a high quality product. And again, the result sort of speaks for itself there. So I'm gonna hit a few more of those away, gather some data, and then I'm gonna go straight into that Kirkland and see what we're getting from sound and feel there. Right, so that's the Titleist combo done. I'm gonna pop that data up in a little bit. I just wanna get this sort of measured first so we can sit down and have a chat about it afterwards. So I've just been tapping the ball on the face of this club, so there's a definite different acoustic. I wonder if you'll be able to pick that up on here, but let's get a little couple away again and see what we end up with. So I'm now in the Kirkland driver and the Kirkland ball. So it's that combo I want to know about. Okay, slightly more high pitch. That was a little bit out the heel, to be fair, so wouldn't be surprised if that picks up in spin a little bit. I have to say, feel-wise, I enjoyed it. It was lively. There was no sense of tinniness to it. Whilst it was more high-pitched, I still felt the face had a bit of life to it, and I felt the ball was coming off with power. I didn't necessarily do it justice with the strike off the heel. So let's get a few more central and see where we end up data-wise. That was more like it. Out the middle, slight hint of draw. Again, felt really solid for a driver that's supposed to be marketed as budget or value, if you like. It's got a pretty premium feel to it. The whole thing, like I said, when you look down on that, I am very impressed here. Okay, that was a better hit than either of the first two, so I'll be intrigued to see how that one flies. Really stable in flight, decent level of carry. Let's go and have a look at the numbers. Well, that's interesting. There's an awful lot to get my teeth stuck into here. And the first thing that I really noticed that stood out to me straight away was that the Kirkland driver, for how much cheaper it is than that Titleist product, is actually producing me, on average, nearly a mile an hour more ball speed. That's fascinating to see from just a pure head point of view. But when you delve deeper into the numbers, which you'll see on the screen here, the spin has absolutely killed the output. So I was getting nearly 4,000 revs of spin from that Kirkland driver. Well struck, by the way. Hit a lot more balls afterwards so to get a bigger average. And I hit a lot of good strikes. I was finding the middle really well with that Kirkland driver, and I was still spinning it up at nearly 4,000 revs. So even off a ball speed of kind of PGA Tour average, over 170 miles an hour, I was only getting 275 yards of carry. And it wasn't rolling out that far either because of the level of spin, which was creating a steep descent angle. I was getting about 292 in total. So the Titleist was actually, as I said, producing slightly less ball speed, 170.5, which is still strong. But the spin was out of this world different. 2,500 revs, basically, 2,517. Similar launch, I was getting a touch more launch out of the Kirklands, within kind of half a degree though, 15.4 from the Titleist, 16.1 from the Kirkland. But the downwind effect or the downgrain effect of that spin was that I was carrying the Titleist 304 yards. So basically 30 yards further through the air. And that gets magnified even further when you go into the total distance, because it's coming in at a shallower descent angle with less backspin. It's actually rolling out to 324. So the numbers there are wildly different in terms of the output, despite that really impressive ball speed number. So my hunch on that is the shaft in the Kirkland driver did feel very soft. That even flow red is quite a soft profile. Even though the Ventus red that I've got in the Titleist is a softer profile, it still had a bit more done to it. It's been tipped an inch to make the tip a little bit more stable and control that spin. And it is very much a premium upchargeable shaft. So my initial hunch is that it's probably a shaft issue that's causing that. But I also wonder whether it's something to do with these balls. So maybe it's time to have a little swap around. Let's try that Titleist with the Kirkland and vice versa, and let's see what that does to the data. Sorry to interrupt. If you are enjoying the video, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, it really helps us out, and comment down below. Have you tried any other budget product that you think's really good, and how's it been working out for your game? Right, okay, so I've got the Titleist driver back in my hand, but I've got the Kirkland ball down on the floor. So I'm just gonna clip a few away, start to get a sense of what we're seeing from a data point of view, and let's revisit. So let's just whack a few away, shall we? Okay, so that's a few away again with now the Titleist driver and the Kirkland ball. So let's do the opposite. Let's get the Kirkland driver with the Pro V1s. I don't want to give you a spoiler alert, but I was quite impressed with what I was seeing from that first combo. So it's going to be interesting to see how this bit pans out. Well, I don't even know what to say. That's actually probably posed more questions than answers. So again, I'll pop the data up on the screen for you, but let's go with the Titleist driver when I switched into the Kirkland ball first. So what I was seeing there was some really impressive ball speed, nearly 172 miles an hour, 171.9. Spin in a lovely window at 2,463 revs per minute. Launch stayed pretty similar, 15 to 16 degrees of launch. A 309 carry on average, and a 329 rollout. That's superb numbers for me. That's really optimal, and actually, bizarrely, is better than what I was getting with the Titleist driver and the Titleist Pro V1. I don't really have much of an explanation for that. It just seemed to be a really nice combo there for me. And when I flipped into the Kirkland driver, I was expecting to see significantly more spin based on what we saw when I went Kirkland driver, Kirkland ball. But again, the numbers are pretty good here. 171.2 in terms of ball speed. That's a really nice output. Only 2,600 and a bit, so 2,612 of spin. So I've only gone up 150 revs really there from the Titleist driver Kirkland ball combo. Again, launch very much the same at 15.9, carrying a very healthy 300 yards. So 9 less than the Titleist driver and Kirkland ball combo, but still a good output. And then rolling out to 312. So weirdly, the three combinations that I've seen other than the Kirkland driver and the Kirkland ball together, for me, as quite a high speed player, I was generating far too much spin there, 3,900 revs of spin. But the other three combinations, kind of much of a muchness, all around that 171 ball speed, all hovering around that 2,500 spin number and just carrying at 300 or just above. So there was, like I said, kind of a muchness there, which is really interesting and not what I was expecting to see. So for someone like me, if I was price conscious and I was looking to get the most bang for my buck and the most value here, I could arguably go into that. I could save the money on the Pro V1s and go into the Kirkland ball and stick with the Titleist driver as my best performer, but I could equally save a fortune and go into the Kirkland driver, but play it with a Pro V1 and only lose kind of 9 yards. So that's a really interesting proposition in terms of my testing. So I'd be fascinated to see if anyone else does a similar experiment. One thing, I was going to end the video here, but like I said, this has kind of posed more questions than answers. So one thing I do want to check on is where we might be losing some with the ball in terms of performance, because historically when I've tested some cheaper balls, the performance can kind of stabilize and stay at a level in driver and maintain ball speed and low spin numbers, but you can sometimes see a lack of performance with wedges, when pitch shots around the greens and control. So like I said, I was going to end the video here, but I want to clip a couple of wedge shots away, Pro V1 to Kirkland, and see what we're doing in terms of spin there. Right, 60-degree wedge, we've got 75 yards set up. I'm going to start with a Kirkland ball, so it'll be interesting to see the numbers here. Bit shy on pace, so I need to hit them a little bit harder, but I came off softer than I was expecting. 6,700 revs of spin and quite a high launch angle there at 36.8. That's interesting. It's not kind of what the optimal numbers I'll be looking for a wedge would be, a lower launch angle than that with a bit higher spin. So that might be where we're starting to see some differences. Bit better pace-wise. Okay, so still relatively high in launch, 34.4, 8.7 of spin, so up a bit, but maybe not quite as optimal as I'd be looking for. Let's hit another one of those. Was nicely clipped. I'm enjoying the feel of that. It's pretty responsive. Okay, so 35.6 degrees of launch, 8,100 revs of spin. So let's get into the Pro V1 now. Same shot, so going to try and hit that 75 yards shot. Yeah, straight away that felt a little bit like it was staying on the face a little bit longer, a little bit shy of pace, 7 yards short there in terms of what I was hoping for. So slightly lower in that launch angle, 32 degrees, 8,500 revs of spin. That tends to be something that we do see when you get some of the more tour level premium balls. That lower launch that the pros are looking for and the higher spin, it just gives that little bit more control. Again, very similar in yardage, about 70 yards, a bit shorter than I wanted, but you could just see in ball flight, yeah, it's taken off significantly lower, less than 30 degrees, 29.9 degrees, and nearly 9,500 revs of backspin. That's really interesting. Let's hit another one. You can just see it in terms of the ball flight going much more forwards rather than up there. Hit the same number again. I need to eat some more Weetabix. And once again, in terms of that launch, it's under 30 degrees, 29.2. So getting more of that tour flight with oodles of spin, 9,500 revs of spin again. Much more like what they're looking for on tour. And therein might lie the difference between the balls. Let's get into those actual averages now. Okay, so the wedge data. Now I feel like I'm back a little bit in my lane here where I understand what's going on, and I saw a bit more of what I expected to see there. So from the Kirkland ball that I hit with my 75 yard shots there, I was getting around 35 degrees of launch, which is a lot higher than I'm used to seeing with my premium ball that I play with. And I was getting around 8,400 revs of spin, 8,447 to be precise on average. So that, to me, is a lot higher launching and lower spinning than I'm used to, which, as I said, when I was hitting those shots, is not really what you tend to look for as a better player. You want a lower launching wedge that's got plenty of spin because that gives you the control. And when I flicked over into the Titleist Pro V1, that's exactly what I saw. So I was back down to, I dropped over 4.5 degrees of launch angle, so at 30.4 degrees, with a spin rate of 9,168. So that's gone up a significant proportion. And that gave me a much more familiar ball flight that I'm used to seeing on those wedges, more of a driving shot that just grips up on its first bounce rather than that kind of driver style high launch, low spin shot. But overall, there's quite a lot to get your teeth stuck into there, and I'm not entirely sure I know what to make of it yet. Truth be told, at the top end of the bag, other than the Kirkland combination, which I couldn't have played because it was spinning the ball a lot for me there, I could save an awful lot of money by going into the Kirkland driver but pairing that with the Titleist ball. I could save a little less money by going into the Titleist driver and pairing that with the Kirkland ball, because the other three combinations that I saw were actually surprisingly similar, all within 5 or 6 yards, which is pretty remarkable, especially when you consider the spin and launch maintained very, very similar numbers there as well. But as we've just seen, as you go down into the short game, as so often happens with these balls, which is why these companies spend so much money on manufacturing different covers, different cores to create that level of control, I think the difference really started to show out there, but it just depends on what you value within your game. So I'd love to know down in the comments below, have you tried this Kirkland driver and Kirkland ball? Let me know what you think and let me know how you've got on.